know it's getting towards the end of the conference, and we're probably all a bit exhausted and tired from all of the wonderful things that we've learned in the last 3 days. So I will try and keep this short and snappy, and we'll do some questions at the end if you'd like to ask any questions. If you do, you're going to have to use your outdoor voice because we don't have a microphone to run around the room. So today what I wanted to talk to you about was a topic that is very dear to my heart, which is around leadership, and particularly leadership of large capital-intensive projects. There is a lot of talk in the industry globally about what makes a good project leader and needing good project leadership. And for someone like myself who is part-time commercial and part-time academic, the question was really raised in my mind is, what do we mean when we say leadership of projects? Is that the same as leadership in a general management sense? Is there anything specific about the project context that leadership needs to be different for? And as a discipline, as a project management as a discipline, it's actually a management discipline. And the question in my mind was really, do we understand the difference as a community between management of projects and leadership of projects? And is that important? So what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about setting the scene for the topic, getting a little bit into the difference between management and leadership, and then report back on a small research study that I have done and continue to do in this field. If you have questions along the way, I'm also happy to take those. So as I said, this really came about in my mind thinking about the large-scale complex projects that are out there. And large-scale complex projects are occurring all over the place. We've had the recent World Cup in Brazil, and there have obviously been some successes with some of their projects, and not quite so successes, shall we say. There are large airport projects all over the world. There are telecommunication projects. There are, in particular in Australia, we have, for those of you who have picked up on the accent, I'm Australian, we have a large fibre network project going into fibre optics across our entire country. Now, our entire country has about 26 million people and a lot of sand in between them, not so different to this particular region. There are very large mining projects. Our next speaker might recognise that photo. And then we have a lot of defence system projects, all of which get a lot of media play. There is a lot of complexity involved in these projects, and their success is often down to the quality of the leader that is bringing the teams together. Now, in a lot of these projects, the contracting arrangements are very complex. You end up in many cases with PPPs or special purpose vehicles and joint ventures underneath them. The teams are often globally distributed. And if you look at the Joint Strike Fighter project, that has not only the complications and the complexities of the technology involved, but they become political projects on a global scale, where every part of that project is designed, produced, manufactured in a different part of the world, shipped to another part of the world, put together by 5 different companies, all of which have different cultures, different languages involved. Leadership of that kind of project becomes on a scale that is different to, you know, if you were buying new chairs for this hotel facility. There would be a lot of chairs that you would need to buy, but slightly less complex than having to put together a Joint Strike Fighter. So one of the things that really brought it home, especially in Australia, has been this need for project leadership. We've had, and our next speaker is actually from the John Grill Centre. John Grill was the chairman of Worley Parsons, and when he is the chairman of Worley Parsons, when he stepped down as CEO, he donated a large sum of money to Sydney University to set up the John Grill Centre for Project Leadership, because he saw in his business, working in very large scale, complex projects, that we did not have a depth of project leader capable of working on those projects. Now, the work that I do with Human Systems, a lot of that is benchmarking with some of the larger organisations in the world. One in particular, oil company, Shell, that I work with, has established the Shell Project Academy for the very reason that they had emerging complex projects for which they realised they did not have the depth of capability of project leadership to lead. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar projects, first refineries on mainland China, those sorts of things. And when they did that project, they had to bring one of their project leaders out of retirement because they had no one across the entire company. Now, Shell's a very large company that they felt had the experience and expertise and leadership skills to run that project. Now, he successfully implemented that project a number of years ago, but by the time he finished, he was in his late 70s. And he said it was a lot of fun. The project literally nearly killed him, and he didn't have another one in him. And so this idea of having to produce great leaders is a problem, because if you look at the mega projects that are out there, they go on for such a long time, and they are so stressful and draining. By the time you're qualified to lead them, you're well advanced into your career. The time you have left in your career allows you to do 2, maybe 3 projects, which means there isn't a lot of time in which we can get the leadership that we need developed, utilised, and that then it's a bit gone. So it's a big problem in the world, and this is what sparked my interest. But I got thinking about what is the difference between management and leadership. And John Cotter has recently released a new book called Accelerate. For those of you who are not familiar with John's work, he is the father of organisational change management. He works out of Harvard, very well respected academic and well published author. In his latest book, he looks at, he puts out a list of things that he deems to be management, and from his lifetime of research. And in management, he classifies as the planning, the budgeting, the organising, the staffing, the measuring, and the problem solving to do what we know how to do exceptionally well. Consistently producing results, dependable results. Now, the top list there, planning, budgeting, organising, staffing, measuring, problem solving, sounds very much like the words that we use in project management, especially if we're looking at things like the PMBOK guide. But when it comes to the last 2 points, doing what we know how to do exceptionally well, the definition of projects is that they are unique endeavours. So, by our very definition, it is not something we know how to do very well. We know how to do project management well, but each project may be very new. There has never been a Joint Strike Fighter before. All of that technology is new. Thinking about Brian's presentation earlier in this conference, if someone comes to you and says, the scope of your next project is to go grab an asteroid, pull it into the orbit of the moon, you go, oh, yeah, that's not something we do every day. So he doesn't have a model to follow. So it got me thinking, are we doing the wrong things to get to where we want to get to? And then when I looked at Mr. Cotter's idea of leadership, he's talking about establishing direction, aligning people, motivating people, inspiring, mobilising people. All of that's about people, not about process, which was the first thing that I noticed. And then the last thing, it's using those things to propel us into the future. And although NASA might be at the extreme edge of what we do in project management, they truly are propelling us into the future. And that's what projects do. And I thought, ooh, that is very interesting. And it's not, we tend to talk about the blue side, whereas what we want to achieve is really on the green side. And the academic conversation and the practitioner conversation around leadership and project management has some confusion in it. And I think the confusion comes from the fact that what we are trying to do in the world of projects is mobilise people to achieve astonishing results. And they can be astonishing in terms of meteors, they can be astonishing in terms of organisational change capability, implementing e-finance systems across a global organisation. I find that to be an astonishing result, almost as astonishing as a meteor, not quite. But what we want to do is propel ourselves and our organisations into the future. But we have been trying to do it by planning, budgeting, staffing, measuring and problem solving. So I took that idea and formulated the research questions around exploring the nature of what it means to be a good leader, and a good leader specifically in a project context. So what we wanted to do was look at large-scale, complex, major capital investment projects. We wanted to find out what was common and what was distinct from general leadership. We wanted to find out how leaders got to where they got, what makes them great at what they do, and then I was very interested about whether they were able to articulate what it was about leadership that was distinct from management in a project context. Now, I had a theory that potentially they wouldn't be able to distinguish between management and leadership, and that was what was leading to the confusion. I was proved wrong about that. So what we did was let's say qualitative, not quantitative, qualitative study. There were 14 semi-structured interviews that we conducted with participants who are great leaders. Now, it's very hard to determine who was a great leader, but what we did was went to very respected people that we knew and asked them to recommend someone they felt in their organisation was a great leader. And then they said, well, how do you mean great? I said, well, have you worked with them? Did you think they were great? Do you get feedback from your teams that they were a great leader to work with, those sorts of things? So in terms of the demographics, the largest proportion of participants came from the oil and gas field and the defence sector. We had some from the telco, ICT, infrastructure and mining. So there's a broad range. The ICT projects tended to be a little bit smaller in dollar value than some of the others, but if you're looking at major capital projects and very complex ones, coming from oil and gas and defence makes sense. Interestingly, we had 2 women and 2 men participate as great leaders. In terms of gender diversity, I recommended one of those female leaders as a great leader. She recommended one other woman, and all of the rest were recommended by men. It was interesting that men will recommend, in general, and there's some research that shows this, because as humans we look for what is similar to ourselves. But men recognise other men as great leaders, and women recognise women. The dollar value of project range from about $3.5 billion up to $60 billion. The majority of them were in the multiple billions. So large amounts of money. But what did we find? In particular, what we did look at was, what leaders talk about when they're talking about management versus leadership. And I said that I had thought they might talk about project management aspects and talking about the processes and the pinbox guide type language when they were thinking leadership. And I was proved wrong. These leaders understood what leadership was and used a very different language to the project management language that we see in the standards that most of the associations have for us, which was really encouraging. So the things that they did talk about, they talked about, and we coded all of the interviews for these particular categories to make sure that there was evidence that these leaders were able to articulate these concepts. They all talked about establishing direction. They all talked about aligning people, motivating people and inspiring them. Everything they talked about was people-centric. Very little of what they talked about was about the process of project management, except for problem solving. This is the only crossover between management and leadership in this group, and they talked about problem solving a lot. None of them talked about any of the other things that were on the management side of Cotter's list. And the reason I think that I'm going to propose that they talk about problem solving is that projects are essentially problems that need to be solved. They're a riddle. Someone comes to you and says you want to grab an asteroid, that's a problem. You need to sit down and think about the answers, and that is what differentiates projects from business as usual. And in terms of leadership, it explains why project leaders think about problem solving and talk about that from a management paradigm and put it into their leadership paradigm. But there were some other things that they talked about that they thought were critical to success. And the first one was collaboration. Nearly all of them used phrases like, I have an open door policy. They had a very open approach with their teams. They tried to foster an environment where people felt safe enough to come to them with accurate data, accurate information. They didn't try and see only the good in their projects. They were very willing to accept, and I use the term, accept the horrors of their current reality so that they can deal with it. Loyalty and trust within the team was highly valued. They all had the attitude that mistakes were learning opportunities and people were not chastised for making mistakes as long as they learned. However, if there was any unethical or anti-team behaviour, these leaders would act quickly to axe the individual. So the first stance was we'll protect the team, but if one of the team members acts against the team, we'll kill the team member to save the team. Metaphorically speaking. I don't want any of my participants to be arrested. The other thing they all talked about was seeing the big picture. And this is where we get a crossover with organisational change management, and the concepts that come into that is around being able to draw out themes, see patterns and contextualise that big picture. I've got a quote up there from one of the participants, but some project managers are seen as very bureaucratic and process driven. That is one of the things that I think is very old school in project management. It is driven a lot by the foundations of our profession, where we started in a world of process. We wrote very large, any of you have seen the Pinlock Guide recently, excellent book, but ginormous, full of a lot of process. And when it comes to running these large projects and leading them, all of the leaders acknowledge that you need a process, but at the end of the day, their role was to find the appropriate amount of process and paint that big picture for people. Building the team. All of the great leaders that we talked to said that they chose the team well at the beginning and then let them run it. They were not, they had the ability to micromanage and chose not to use that skill unless it was absolutely necessary. They worked to empower the team so that the team could get on with the job. And part of that is that these leaders recognised that the projects that they were working on were so big, they were bigger than one person, bigger than themselves. These were not ego-driven individuals, which surprised me. There is, for a number of years, there had been in our industry a theme of complex projects. There have been a few associations that have come up specifically around complex project management, and a lot of the conversation had been around, we are so amazing as complex project leaders that we will come in and save the day, and we need to have our own standards for complex projects because we are special. And I mean, it was almost like they were wearing superhero capes and sort of saving, flying in to save the day. These people that we spoke to were truly humble, and they understood the value of their role. And I thought this quote really captured what most of them were saying and thinking is, if you think you can do it all by yourself, you won't get anywhere. And that applied to them and applied to every team member. It was a real team effort in every single instance. They all talked about building trust. They all talked about the team needing trust and for this to be critical. They all said, well, the majority of them said that they gained trust by leading by example. They're often very calm people. They're not making a fuss. They're not creating drama. They often feel that their role is to remove the drama and the rhetoric around how complex and how difficult the work is to make it manageable for the people that they're working with. So a lot of them are very centred, calm people, as if you meet them face to face, very humble and get on with the job. They don't ask their team to do things that they wouldn't do themselves. A lot of them use that phrase in various different ways, but they also make it very clear that the leader is not just one of the boys or a friend on the floor. They're friendly without necessarily being best friends. Decision making was interesting. All of them said that they gathered information from multiple sources. They always researched, they always asked for more information, but once they had enough information, they made very, very rapid decisions. They also said that working the system was very important. So we asked a question that was essentially, do you feel that project leaders have to be cowboys? They have to be, rule breakers? And nearly all of them said that they saw no value in being a rebel, simply for being a rebel's sake. It was better to know the culture of the company and the organisation that you're working in. And if you're working in special purpose vehicles and joint ventures and those sorts of things, understanding the political dynamicism, and then working the system to get what you want. Fighting the system didn't seem to be the best way to go about it, but a number of them said, you need to know how to work the system, but you need to know when to bend the rules and how to work around them to do what's best for your project. Nearly all of them describe themselves as thinkers, not feelers. Most of them are engineers by background, which makes a lot of sense. They did say that secondary characteristics that were needed were intuition and empathy, but nearly all of them said that this was a set of traits they had to learn. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people in the project management profession. We do tend to be a little bit more introverted as a collective, but they recognised the need for it and they developed empathy and intuition. They also said resilience was important, so the ability to keep going and have faith when the going gets tough. It was tempered with the ability to know when to terminate a project or a component of a project, so it's not being obstinate about sticking with the project, but on these types of projects, being resilient to setbacks is part of, I mean, you have to pick yourself up and keep going, you have to pick up the team and keep the team going, and it's you first before the team. The other thing that they talked about was being really flexible. So great leaders are very comfortable in those grey areas. A lot of the time when we look at the project management standards that are out there, we are trying to reduce the complexity down to something that is entirely controllable, that is understandable. We're trying to get a handle on risks and minimise them and mitigate everything so that nothing goes wrong. Obviously things are going to go wrong. This group of project leaders are less concerned about making the world controllable and then more about accepting that the world is going to change. And the world's going to change before they've even bothered making a plan, how they're going to make a plan. But being able to be flexible around that and understand that it's all just going to continuously move was part of what made them great. And doing it in a really calm way. So not being dramatic about it, not causing drama and emotion in the team, but just carrying on. They all had, and I love this one particularly struck a chord with me, and I've used the words from one of the participants there, relentless daily focus on learning. These people are curious by nature, they are curious about their own ability, they understood their own strengths and weaknesses, and they were dedicated to continuous learning, and that followed through for the rest of their team as well. So most of them had incorporated feedback personally within their teams, applying those to self-improve as well as improving their projects in what were all rapidly changing complex environments. So in summary, what we did find was from the theory, talking to practitioners, we found the theory held up. All of the practitioners were able to articulate what they did or made them great fitted with the theory that was out there. They were all using those to propel them into the future. The only additional one was the problem solving, which is where the management paradigm and the leadership paradigm have come together in a project context. But then they were able to talk in more, I guess, common language around what it meant to do things like establish direction, align people. The things that they did to achieve all of the things in theory were to see the big picture and be able to communicate that as a vision, build the team, build trust, collaborate, make fast evidence-based decisions, be flexible and resilient, work the system and love to learn. So some of those, it's a mixture of personal sort of emotional intelligence and understanding where they're at as individuals and how to work that, as well as some really specific actions. Things like working the system or making fast decisions. And that sort of brings me to the end of the time that's been allowed. I'd just like to sort of acknowledge my co-author on this was a lady called Jane Helm, who couldn't be here with us Today she's my lead researcher at Human Systems and is a wonderful, wonderful lady. My email address is up there. If any of you would like the slides, I'm more than happy to share that with you. I'm also more than happy to engage in a dialogue afterwards, but if anyone has a couple of questions now, I'm also happy to take them. Yes? So the question was the sample taken from one particular region or all across the world? The sample was taken predominantly from Australia and America. We didn't have any representatives from this region. And then, yeah, I would agree. So the question or the statement is that the leadership traits that we've found are applicable across all leadership, general as well as project. And I agree, nearly all of them are applicable across projects and general management. The only thing that we found thus far was the problem-solving component is the slightly different, is the crossover between management and the leadership that you don't find, or at least Potter doesn't find, in general management. And that is because of the nature of projects being essentially problems that need to be solved. Excellent, so I might hand back over to